I've worked in customs for 11 years. I've seen fake milk powder used to hide, drugs and cash stitched into jacket linings. I've seen every trick in the book. That day, it was an international student's turn to pass through security with his suitcase. The suitcase looked totally ordinary, and the guy was well-behaved and orderly. The X-ray scan showed nothing unusual. I didn't let him pass. I told him to open the case, in the false. Bottom 3 rocks were resting quietly, dusty and seemingly generic. They looked like the kind you could find anywhere. I stared at them for 3 seconds without saying a single word. I pinched my walkie-talkie and uttered a code word. 10 minutes later, the entire airport was locked down. I've worked in customs for 11 years. This job has ground down all my unrealistic illusions, but it has also sharpened all my instincts. I've seen a mother hiding contraband inside a milk powder tin, her eyes filled with despair. I've seen a businessman sewing stacks of US dollars into his jacket lining, his eyes filled with greed. I've also seen a young man who swallowed dozens of capsules trying to smuggle them through with his body, his eyes completely numb. In 11 years, I've seen too many kinds of eyes, and I've developed a pair of eyes that can read someone just by looking at theirs. Today I was on shift at inspection counter number 6 of the T3 terminal's international arrivals. At 3 p.m., the passenger flow was steady. A young man pushing a silver suitcase walked up to my counter. He was a very ordinary young man wearing a white t-shirt and jeans with a pair of black-rimmed glasses. He looked like a student. He handed his passport to me. The cover was brand new. I flipped it open. Gao Yuan, 21 years old, returning from studying in Country H. Welcome back. I stamped it and handed the passport back to him. His hand was very steady and his fingernails were trimmed clean. Thank you. He smiled politely, pushing his suitcase toward the conveyor belt. Please wait a moment, I spoke up. Gao Yuan stopped his pace and turned back to look at me with a hint of just right confusion in his eyes. Sir, your luggage needs to go through the X-ray machine. All right, he nodded. Without showing any impatience, he proactively lifted the suitcase onto the conveyor belt himself. Everything was too orderly, too normal. I stared at the monitor screen. The X-ray scanned through the case clothes books, a few packs of local specialties, and a razor clear and organized. There was no abnormal density or suspicious shape. My colleague Xiao Li, who was responsible for watching the X-ray machine, gave me a thumbs-up gesture. I didn't move. My gaze was still fixed on Gao Yuan's face. He stood in place waiting quietly, with a slight smile on his face, but the thumb of his left hand was unconsciously and rapidly rubbing the second joint of his index finger over and over again. This is a classic subconscious behavior of trying to relieve extreme internal tension through a tiny repetitive movement. What was he nervous about? Over a suitcase that had no issues, sir. There's no problem with your case. You may go, Xiao, I reminded from the side. Gao Yuan nodded to me and prepared to retrieve his suitcase. Open the case. My voice wasn't loud, but it was very clear. Xiao Li froze for a moment. Gao Yuan's hand, which was about to grab the suitcase, also stopped in midair. The smile on his face stiffened for a split second, but quickly returned to normal. Officer, didn't you say there's no problem? His tone remained calm, but that left hand rubbing his index finger stopped its muscles tightening. Routine check, please cooperate. I looked into his eyes and repeated, open the case. Gao Yuan locked eyes with me for 3 seconds. He lowered his eyelids. All right. He lifted the suitcase onto the inspection counter and entered the password to open it. The inside was just like him, clean and tidy. The clothes were folded squarely and kept in vacuum bags. The books, wrapped in book covers, were stacked neatly in the corner. I put on gloves and began the inspection. Taking things out one by one, flipping through the books page by page, I found nothing. Some passengers nearby were already whispering complaints, feeling that I was making a mountain out of a molehill and wasting time. Xiao Li also looked awkward, wondering if I was being too sensitive. Today, a faint, almost imperceptible smile even returned to the corner of Gao Yuan's mouth. It was a smile of relaxation. I ignored everyone. I emptied all the contents of the suitcase. Then I lightly tapped the bottom lining of the suitcase with my knuckles. Thud, thud, thud. The sound was very dull. I raised my head to look at Gao Yuan. The smile on his face completely vanished, replaced by a deathly pale complexion. Open it, I said. Open what to the false bottom of the suitcase. Gao Yuan's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. I didn't know this suitcase had a false bottom. His voice began to go dry. I'll ask one more time, open it. From under the inspection counter, I pulled out a multifunctional screwdriver. Gao Yuan looked at the tool in my hand, and his lips began to tremble. He didn't move. I wasted no more words and used the flat head of the screwdriver to insert into the gap of the lining, prying hard. Click! The lining board was pried open by me, revealing a crack. A faint scent mixing earth and machine oil drifted out. I ripped away the entire lining board. The false bottom of the suitcase was lined with a thick layer of foam. There were 3 precise indentations on the foam. Resting quietly inside the indentations were 3 rocks, dusty and with irregular edges and corners. They looked just like the kind of pebbles you could pick up at random by any riverbank. Xiao Li leaned over to take a look, his face full of bewilderment. Rocks all this just for these? The surrounding passengers also broke into a buzzing murmur. Gao Yuan looked completely drained. As he leaned against the inspection counter, panting heavily, he looked at those 3 rocks, his eyes filled with terror. I ignored him. All of my attention was concentrated on those 3 rocks. I stared at them for 3 seconds, and then I reached out my hand to pick up one of them. It felt ice cold, heavy in texture and rough on the surface. It even had some dried mud stuck to it. I brought it before my eyes, shifting it through a few angles against the intense beam of the spotlight. Above the inspection counter, under a certain specific minute angle across the surface of the rock, a purple streak of light fainter than a strand of hair and almost impossible to detect. With the naked eye flashed and vanished, my heart took a sudden heavy dive. I put down the rock without saying a word. I grabbed the walkie-talkie hanging on my shoulder, pinched it, and pressed the talk button. The clamor of the entire inspection hall seemed to be shut out at this exact moment. My voice was very steady without a single ripple. I uttered a code word that only I and team leader Zhang Lei understood, counter number 6. The rocks are very hard. The walkie-talkie went silent for a second, and then came team leader Zhang Lei's decisive 2 words, received. 10 minutes later, all entrances and exits of the entire T3 terminal were fully locked down. An ear-piercing alarm sounded through the skies. The moment the alarm was triggered, the entire inspection all instantly erupted into absolute chaos. Passengers' screams, children's crying, and the airport broadcasts urgent. Evacuation announcements tangled into a mess. Gao Yuan slumped onto the ground, his face pale as a ghost. I didn't care about him. First thing, I placed the 3 rocks back into the false bottom, covered it with the lining board, and closed the suitcase. Then I slapped the highest level security seal onto the suitcase. Just as I finished, all this fully armed airport SWAT officers had already rushed in, setting up a cordoned perimeter. Nobody move! Stay where you are! The SWAT officers' roars drowned out everything. Team leader Zhang Lei led 2 colleagues from the Customs Anti-Smuggling Bureau, walking over to me with huge strides. His expression was more serious than I had ever seen before, with veins bulging on his forehead. Zhuang Hai situation. He didn't waste a single word. Target Gao Yuan, male, 21 years old, a returning international student from country H. I pointed at Gao Yuan, who was slumped on the ground. Suspect items: 3 rocks in the false bottom of his suitcase. I pointed at that silver suitcase. I used "the rocks are very hard." Zhong Li's pupils shrank fiercely. The rocks are very hard. This code word corresponded to the highest level national security threat. Event within the internal customs system. Once this level of alarm was triggered, it meant there might exist a smuggling operation capable of shaking the fundamental interests of the nation. The authority to handle it had already exceeded the scope of customs. It needed to be reported immediately to the National Security Department for them to take over. I had worked with Zhang Li for 7 years, and this code word was one I had never used even once. He knew I wouldn't play around with this kind of thing. "Are you sure?" Zhang Lei's voice was kept very low. 100%, I answered. He asked no further questions and immediately picked up an encrypted phone to dial a number. "This is Zhang Lei from Capital Airport Customs. Initiate the Boulder contingency plan. Target discovered at T3 Terminal Inspection Counter number 6. Requesting immediate reinforcement from the Ministry of State Security." Hanging up the phone, the 2 colleagues from the Anti-Smuggling Bureau had already hoisted Gao Yuan up from the ground and slapped handcuffs on him. That silver suitcase was placed inside a specially made metal explosion-proof case. Everything was proceeding in a tense and highly efficient rhythm. In less than 20 minutes, 3 black Hongqi sedans drove straight through the airport's special corridor all the way onto the tarmac. A group of sharp-looking people dressed in black suits got out of the cars. Leading them was a woman, around 30 years old, with short hair and a gaze as sharp as a knife. She didn't wear any credentials, but the moment she appeared, the head of the airport public security proactively stepped forward to salute her. She walked straight up to Zhong Lei. "Ministry of State Security, Xiao." Wenjun, the officer in charge of the event. Her voice was just like her gaze, cold and hard. "Customs." Zhongli, where are the suspect and the evidence? Xiao Wenjun asked. Zhonglei pointed at Gao Yuan, who had already been put into an armored vehicle by SWAT officers and that separately secured metal case. Who was the first responder to discover it? Xiao Wenjun's gaze swept over us. It was me. I stepped forward. Xiao Wenjun's gaze lingered on me for a few seconds as if scanning me with an X-ray. Walk me through the process. I briefly and concisely recounted the entire process from the moment Gao Yuan walked up to my counter to when I discovered the rocks, including my judgment of his micro-expressions and my inspection of the suitcase body. You pried open the false bottom and saw the rocks. Xiao Wenjun interrupted me, and then you directly reported a national security threat. Then what on earth made you judge those 3 ordinary rocks to be a national security threat? Instinct. I said it's my instinct, I answered. The corner of Xiao Wenjun's mouth hooked into a cold arc carrying unconcealed mockery. Officer Zhuang, is it? Do you know because of a single instinct of yours how much economic loss the grounding of the entire capital airport will cause? Do you know how many international flights are currently being diverted to other cities? Do you know what kind of responsibility you'll have to bear if this matter is ultimately proven to be a false alarm? A barrage of rapid-fire questions shot at me like bullets. I didn't back down, meeting her gaze. I know. You're risking your entire career and future on your instinct. I don't need to risk anything. I said word by word because I saw the purple light. Purple light. Xiao Wenjun knitted her brows. Under a specific angle of the intense beam of light, there was a flash of a purple streak across the surface of the rock. Extremely subtle, but I saw it. I am telling the truth. This is the real reason why I triggered the highest level alarm. 3 years ago, my mentor, the old chief Lin Haidong, sacrificed his life during a border anti-smuggling mission. That time what they intercepted was a new type of contraband disguised as ordinary ore. Afterward, at the internal briefing, I saw the description of that contraband. Its core material, when excited under a certain specific light source, would exhibit a unique purple glow. After that incident, the code word, "the rocks are very hard," and the bolder plan behind it were officially established. The people who knew this detail didn't exceed 5 in the entire customs system. Zhongli was one of them. Hearing the words purple light, his expression also changed. Xiao. Wenjun apparently didn't know this inside story. She gave a cold laugh. Purple light, Officer Zhuang. Have you read too many novels? With a wave of her hand, she ordered, take the evidence to the isolation testing room. Have the tech team analyze it immediately. Take the suspect to the interrogation room. I will personally interrogate him. Her people immediately went into action. Team leader, Xiao. Wenjun turned to Zhonglei. I need to requisition one of your customs interrogation rooms. Also this officer. Zhuang cannot leave the airport before I reach a conclusion, and he must cooperate with the investigation at any time. Finishing her words, she turned and walked away, her high heels clacking crisply and powerfully on the floor. Zhonglei patted my shoulder, his gaze complex. Zhuang Haiyu. Team leader, I stake this uniform of mine as a guarantee, I interrupted him. Zhongli let out a sigh and said nothing more. The next few hours were a long, agonizing ordeal. I was arranged to stay in a small lounge with 2 SWAT officers standing guard at the door. I couldn't look at my phone or contact the outside world. Time ticked away minute by minute. Outside the window, night fell. T3. Terminal was still in the state of lockdown. The tarmac was completely empty, quiet as a ghost town. I could imagine that it was already a raging storm outside right now, but my heart was extraordinarily calm. I believed in my eyes and believed in my mentor even more. Not until midnight was the door of the lounge pushed open forcefully. Xiao Wenjun walked in. Her face was even colder than before, and her eyes carried a suppressed rage. She slammed a document hard onto the table in front of me. Officer, Zhuang, you'd better give me an explanation. I picked up that document. It was the preliminary testing report from the tech team. The bolded black text in the conclusion section of the report stung my eyes. Submitted samples, a BC, spectroscopic analysis, composition testing, and radiation testing, all found no anomalies. The main component is granite. Conclusion, ordinary rocks. My brain went buzz. With a loud ring. How is it possible? My people interrogated Gao Yuan for 8 hours. Xiao Wenjun's voice sounded like shards of ice. From beginning to end, he had only one sentence. Those were rocks he picked up by a riverbank when traveling in Country H, and he brought them back as souvenirs because he thought they looked nice. We checked his social relations and family background inside out, and they are completely clean. Right now, all the evidence points to one thing. Xiao Wenjun leaned down, supporting herself on the table with both hands, staring dead at me. You are lying. I am not. My voice was a bit hoarse. What about the purple light our tech? Team deployed the top-tier equipment in the country, checking those 3 rocks inside and out, and they didn't find even a single strand of purple hair. Zhuang. Hi, she was almost roaring. I'll give you 12 hours. From now until 12 o'clock noon tomorrow, you either produce irrefutable evidence that those 3 rocks are a national security threat, or you wait to go to military court because of your so-called instinct. And Purple Light, we missed the best opportunity to catch another big fish. Now get the hell out of here to the confinement room, and think carefully about how to prove you're not a sensationalist lunatic. Her chest was heaving violently, obviously enraged to the extreme. 2 SWAT officers walked in, flanking me on both sides. I didn't resist. My mind was a complete mess. Impossible. I clearly saw that streak of purple light, and it was exactly the same as the pictures from the internal briefing 3 years ago. Where on earth did things go wrong? I was locked into a windowless confinement room. There was only an iron bed in the room. I sat down and forced myself to calm down, replaying everything that happened this afternoon over and over again. Gao Yuan. His expressions, his movements, his left hand, that action of rubbing his index finger. I suddenly remembered something. The moment the false bottom was pried open and the rocks were seen, his nervousness reached a peak. But when I picked up the rocks and illuminated them with the intense spotlight, his expression, besides terror, seemed to hold a hint of something else. What was that? I closed my eyes frantically, searching for that image in my memory. Right, it was a sigh of relief when he saw me using an ordinary intense spotlight to illuminate the rocks, without discovering any anomalies. His expression at that exact split second was a sigh of relief. What was he celebrating? That the light I used was wrong. I stood up abruptly from the bed, rushed to the door, and pounded hard on the iron door. Open the door, I want to see. Zhao Wenjun, I need to re-examine the evidence. I know where the problem is. The iron door of the confinement room opened. Standing at the door was team leader Zhang Lei, his face full of exhaustion and his eyes bloodshot, obviously having stayed up all night. Team leader, come with me. He interrupted me and turned to walk away. I followed behind him, crossing the long corridor. I've also read the tech team's report. Zhang Lei's voice was very deep. Shuanghai, this matter has turned into too huge a mess this time. Team leader, I didn't lie, I said urgently. The problem isn't with the rocks, it's with the light. What light? The internal briefing of my mentor's incident. I've reviewed it repeatedly more than a dozen times. The report mentioned that the kind of purple glow won't appear under all light sources. It only responds to an extremely special narrow-spectrum light source. That frequency band was an optical frequency band that our country had only just successfully experimented with at that time and was completely classified. Conventional testing equipment cannot possibly tune to that parameter at all. Zhong Li's steps came to a halt. He turned his head and stared dead at me. How many tenths of certainty do you have? 10 tenths, I answered decisively. Zhong Li fell silent for a few seconds, pulled out his phone, and dialed that encrypted number once again. This time he didn't say much, just relaying my words exactly as they were. The other end of the phone seemed to go silent as well. Give him an hour. After a long while, Xiao Wenjun's cold voice came through the phone. I'll wait for him in the isolation testing room. The atmosphere in the isolation testing room was so heavy, it felt like water was about to drip out. The 3 rocks were resting quietly on a pure white workstation. Several tech personnel dressed in white research lab coats stood to one side, their gazes looking at me filled with doubt and disdain. Xiao Wenjun stood in the shadow of the corner with her arms crossed. Officer Zhuang, you may begin now. Her tone didn't carry any emotion. I need an adjustable laser emitter, the wavelength. Range needs to be able to cover the far ultraviolet band, I said. A technician sneered. Kid, do you know what you're talking about, far ultraviolet? Do you think this is a sci-fi lab? Do as he says, Zhao Wenjun commanded coldly. Although that technician had a face full of reluctance, he still went to prepare it. Very soon a sophisticated instrument was wheeled over. This is the most advanced equipment within our authority to mobilize, the technician said half-heartedly. The wavelength can go as low as 200 nanometers. Is that enough for you? I nodded, walked to the instrument, turned off all the conventional light sources in the testing room, and switched to total darkness mode. One by one, the lights went out, plunging the entire testing room into a blanket of darkness. Only the faint green glow from the instrument screen shone on my face. I took a deep breath and began to tune the wavelength, adjusting it down bit by bit from the 760 nanometers of visible light. Red light, orange light, yellow light, green light. The 3 rocks on the workstation showed no change at all, still looking dusty and generic. My forehead began to sweat. The sneers of the technician beside me became clearer and clearer. Just as I thought, it's just playing tricks. Xiao Wenjun also knitted her brows, seemingly about to run out of patience. I ignored them and continued down. 400 nanometers, 300 nanometers entering the ultraviolet band, 250 nanometers. Officer Zhuang, your time is running out. Xiao Wenjun's voice sounded like a death. Nell. I gritted my teeth, my fingers steadily turning the dial, when the wavelength. Dial pointed precisely to a scale mark 217.3 nanometers. It was this exact number. The number that flashed and was marked as an experimental parameter in the old chief's report 3 years ago. My hand froze. I raised my head to look at the workstation. A miracle happened under the illumination of that special frequency ultraviolet beam. The 3 originally plain and unremarkable rocks seemed to be injected with life. Their interiors, lit up, countless slender intricate, and galaxy-like brilliant purple streaks of light slowly flowed and intertwined inside the rocks, weaving into an unimaginably complex 3-dimensional network. Those were not rocks, that was a miniature universe composed of pure light. The entire testing room instantly fell into a dead silence. Everyone was stunned into speechless shock by the magnificent and eerie scene before their eyes. The mouths of those technicians stretched wide enough to fit an egg, and their eyeballs were about to pop out. My God, what is this thing in the corner? Xiao Wenjun abruptly stepped out from the shadows. She walked quickly to the workstation, looking at those 3 rocks that seemed to have come alive, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. She snapped her head around to look at me. His eyes practically popped out of his head. My God, what on earth is this? In the corner, Xiao Wenjun suddenly walked out from the shadows. He strode over to the control panel and stared at those 3 stones that seemed to have come alive, his eyes filled with horror and disbelief. He whipped his head around to look at me. Her gaze no longer held any of the previous contempt and mockery, replaced instead by extreme shock and a hint of fear. How did you know this split second? Parameter. For the first time, her voice carried a slight tremor. This is the nation's highest-level optical secret. Ring, ring, ring. The encrypted phone in her pocket rang frantically at this moment. Xiao. Wenjun, as if jolted awake, scrambled to answer the phone. Speak. Team leader Xiao Gaoyuan confessed. On the other end was the urgent voice of a colleague from the interrogation team. Just now, his psychological defenses completely collapsed. He said he was recruited by an organization in Country H. This organization gave him a huge sum of money to bring 3 raw stones back to the country. He said the contact told him these raw stones were absolutely safe and couldn't be detected by any instrument unless illuminated by the secret key light with a wavelength of 217.3 nanometers. He also said the contact location is right. Before the colleague from the interrogation team could finish, Xiao Wenjun's phone dropped to the ground with a smack. All color instantly drained completely from her face. She finally understood. The reason why I knew this top-secret parameter that even she didn't know wasn't because my clearance was high enough, but because this intel was bought 3 years ago with my mentor's life, and just now she had almost sent this hero who used his life to secure the clue to military court as a lunatic. The entire isolation testing room was so quiet that everyone could hear each other's heartbeats. The purple galaxy flowing inside those 3 rocks looked like a specter from another world, mocking human ignorance. Xiao Wenjun's face turned from deathly pale to ash gray, and then from ash gray to a complex flush, shame, lingering fear, and a physiological reaction under extreme shock. She didn't go to pick up the phone on the ground. Zhang Lei had already lunged forward, in one stride, to pick up the phone, roaring into it. Where is the contact location? National Digital Library, 3rd floor. Section C, locker number 307. Contact time, 3 p.m. today. There's less than 2 hours left. Zhongli hung up the phone and looked at Xiao Wenjun, while Xiao Wenjun was currently looking at me. Her gaze was more complex than I had ever seen, containing scrutiny, shock, suspicion, apology, and even a hint of awe. Officer Zhuang, she spoke, her voice dry. I apologize to you for my previous rudeness and arrogance. She stood straight and bowed solemnly to me, a senior official of the Ministry of State Security bowing to a grassroots customs officer. The technicians and colleagues from the Anti-Smuggling Bureau nearby were all dumbfounded. I didn't dodge calmly accepting her apology, because I knew she wasn't apologizing to me. She was apologizing to my mentor, Lin Haidong, who paid with his life 3 years ago for this top secret intel. Now is not the time to talk about this, I said, my tone calm. We still have 1 hour and 50 minutes. This single sentence instantly snapped Xiao Wenjun out of her emotions. Her gaze became sharp as a knife once again. You're right. She turned around and swiftly began to issue commands. Tech team, immediately seal the 3 raw stones into the highest grade energy isolation box for transfer. Team leader, I need to immediately requisition your most elite anti-smuggling officers to cooperate with our operation. Comms team, patch me through to the Municipal Traffic Management Bureau's highest command center. I want an absolute green corridor from the airport to the National Digital Library. Turn every single traffic light along the way green for me, action team, everyone. Assemble downstairs within 1 minute. Target National Digital Library. Yes, ma'am, everyone responded in unison. The previous dejection and doubt were completely swept away, replaced by a combat-ready excitement. And you, Xiao? Wenjun finally looked at me. Comrade Zhuang Hai, according to the special regulations of the National Security Law, I now, in the name of the head of the Ministry of State Security's Boulder Special Task Force, temporarily draft you as a special advisor to the task force. From now on, you will participate in our operation throughout, until this crisis is resolved. Your opinion will directly influence my final decision. Any problem? No, I answered. Good, let's move. 5 minutes later, a special convoy consisting of 3 black Hongqi sedans and 2 customs assault vehicles sounded the highest level alarm, like a black sword. The convoy roared out from the airport's special corridor. I sat in the back seat of the middle Hongqi with Xiao Wenjun on my left and team leader Zhong Lei on my right. The atmosphere inside the car was suffocatingly heavy. Xiao Wenjun held an encrypted tablet, rapidly browsing through something. Gao Yuan has confessed everything, she said without raising her head. He's just a runner, an outermost pawn bought by money. The organization that recruited him goes by the codename ARC, an extremely mysterious transnational organization that we have never heard of before. Their goal is to smuggle this raw stone into our country's borders at all costs. Raw stone, Zhong Lei muttered to himself. What on earth is this thing? We don't know. Xiao Wenjun shook her head, a look of bewilderment appearing on her face for the first time. The Ministry of State Security's database has no records regarding this raw stone. It's like it popped out of thin air. Gao Yuan said the people from the ARC organization told him this stone is a gift from heaven. God's key, sufficient to change the global landscape. God's key. I looked at the street scenery rapidly receding outside the window, the sense of unease in my heart growing stronger and stronger. I always felt that this matter was far from being as simple as smuggling. No matter what it is, I spoke up, breaking the silence in the car. We cannot let it fall into the hands of the contact. Xiao Wenjun raised her head and glanced at me, a hint of approval in her eyes. Correct. She closed the tablet. I have already activated the highest level capture contingency plan. The entire National Digital Library is now an inescapable dragnet prepared for the contact, as long as he dares to show up. I guarantee he won't even be able to fly out like a fly. The convoy sped like lightning. The trip that originally would take over an hour was compressed to 30 minutes with the full cooperation of the Traffic Management Department. At 2:10 p.m., the convoy executed a beautiful tail whip, stopping steadily at the side door of the National Digital Library. The car doors opened. Dozens of Ministry of State Security tactical personnel dressed in black combat uniforms and holding live ammunition stepped off the vehicles as quietly as leopards, quickly occupying various advantageous positions. Zhongli also led his anti-smuggling officers to lock down all exits. Zhuang Hai, come with me, Xiao Wenjun said to me. She led me through a concealed staff corridor, entering straight into the library's central security monitoring room. Inside the monitoring room, over a dozen tech personnel were already standing by in battle formation. The huge spliced screen on the wall displayed the real-time feeds from hundreds of security cameras inside the library. Report all entrances and exits have been secured. Report 3rd floor. Section C has been cleared and all bystanders have been advised to leave. Report sniper team is in position. Field of vision is good. Reports from various teams kept coming through the earpiece. Xiao Wenjun stood in front of the screen, her gaze as cold as ice. Now we wait for the fish to bite. She turned her head to look at me. Zhuang Hai, next I need to borrow your eyes. Out of all the people present, only you have seen the ghost. I need you to help me pick out that ghost who blended in from this sea of people. I nodded, my gaze locked dead onto the stairs leading to the 3rd floor section C on the screen. I knew a silent war was about to begin. Time ticked away minute by minute. The monitoring room was so quiet that only the hum of the operating equipment remained. Everyone's nerves were stretched like a fully drawn bow. The electronic clock on the wall, with its bright red numbers, beat against everyone's heart like a countdown bomb. The scheduled contact time arrived, but in the surveillance feed, the entrance leading to the third floor section C was completely empty. Not a single person. Target has not appeared. All teams stay alert. Do not relax, Xiao. Wenjun ordered into the microphone, in a deep voice. No anxiety could be seen on her face, but her slightly whitening knuckles clutching the walkie-talkie betrayed the tension in her heart. I also kept my eyes glued to the screen, my brain working rapidly. In what way would the other party appear? Would it be an agent in a sharp suit or an unremarkable cleaner? Or maybe he wouldn't come in person at all, but instead remotely. Control some completely oblivious ordinary person to complete this handover. I put myself into the role of that mysterious contact, thinking through every single possibility. Time continued to flow. 3:15 p.m., still no movement. The atmosphere in the monitoring room began to turn a bit anxious. Team. Leader Xiao, could it be that the other party isn't coming? A young analyst couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Shut up, Xiao. Wenjun interrupted coldly. Gao Yuan's capture was completed inside the airport. The news definitely didn't leak out. The other party doesn't know. The courier has compromised. They will definitely come. For a professional agent organization, punctuality is the most basic quality. Unless... She didn't finish her words, but I understood what she meant. Unless the other party's punctuality and the punctuality we understood were not the same concept. My gaze swept across the feed of the library's first-floor lobby on the big screen. People were coming and going, bustling around. There were white-haired old people, vibrant, students and parents bringing their children to read. Everything was so normal, so full of the breath of life. If I were the contact, what would I do? I would absolutely not at the prearranged time. Stealthily head straight to the third floor. That would be too obvious. I would arrive in advance. There were white-haired elders, vibrant students and parents reading with their children. Everything looked so normal, so full of the flavor of everyday life. If I were the contact person, what would I do? I definitely wouldn't head straight to the third floor secretively. At the scheduled time, that would be too obvious. I would at the scheduled, even before the prearranged time. Enter the library under the identity of an ordinary reader. Find a quiet corner. Sit down and read. Just like a drop of water blending into the ocean. Then, after confirming the environment is absolutely safe, stealthily head to the contact location. In fact, he might already be in this building right now. Team leader, Shotai abruptly spoke up. Rewind all surveillance feeds to the 10 minutes before 3 o'clock. Focus the screening on all single males who entered the library between 2:50 p.m. and 3 p.m. Xiao. Wenjun froze for a split second but reacted immediately. Quick, do as he says. The technicians immediately went into action. The hundreds of feeds on the big screen began to fast reverse. Time was frozen at 2:50 p.m. and the feeds began to play at 8 times. Speed. Figures entering the library's main entrance flashed across the screen one by one. I pointed at one of the split screen feeds. It was an inconspicuous corner and the face captured by the camera was a bit blurry. In the feed, a man was passing through the security gate at the entrance. He was of medium build, around 50 years old, wearing a gray jacket and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. In his hand, he was also holding a German edition of Faust. He looked just like a university professor or a scholar coming to look up reference materials. Enlarge this person's facial features. Xiao Wenjun immediately ordered. The feed was enlarged, and after technical sharpening, the man's face became clear, an extremely ordinary face without any features. As the feed was enlarged and technically sharpened, the man's face became clear, an extremely ordinary face without any unique features, belonging to the type that you could never find again once thrown into a crowd. Run it, perform a facial. Match immediately. I want all of his data. The Ministry of State Security's database began to operate at high speed. A few seconds later, the result came out. Report team leader, we found him. Qian Wenbo, 52 years old, professor in the German department at Capital University, and a doctoral advisor. Family background and social relations are completely clean without any suspicious points. Under his name, he has a long-term borrowing card for the National Digital Library. He comes here 2 to 3 times every week, with a very regular habit. A perfect, irreproachable identity. Where is he? Xiao Wenjun asked. We found his last recorded position near the layout bookshelves in the social science reading area on the 2nd floor. Cut his current real-time surveillance feed to the main screen for me. The screen switched. The main screen clearly displayed that professor named Qian Wenbo. He was currently sitting at a table by the window reading a book quietly. The sunlight spilled on him through the window, appearing so peaceful and so serene. In front of him there was also a cup of steaming green tea. Everything was as perfect as a painting. Too perfect. So perfect that it looks exactly like a disguise. There's a problem with him, I said decisively. Reason, Xiao. Wenjun looked at me. Look at his hands. I pointed at the screen. For a scholar who reads books all year round, what should his fingers look like because of flipping books frequently? The pads of the index finger and thumb would have thin, smooth calluses left by long-term friction. But look at his hands, in the feed Qian. Wenbo was lifting his teacup to drink water. His fingers were slender and clean, the pads full and the skin delicate, without any trace of calluses. That is not a scholar's hand. His fingers were clean, the pads, full and the skin delicate without any trace of calluses. That is not a scholar's hand. Those are a pair of hands that almost never touch paper books, and maybe rarely even hold a pen. Also that book in front of him, Faust. Nearly 20 minutes have passed since he sat down until now, and he hasn't even flipped a single page. Xiao Wenjun's pupils contracted instantly. Sniper team, pay attention. She picked up her walkie-talkie, her voice ice-cold. Lock onto target seat K17, in the social science reading area on the second floor. Once he makes any movement, you are authorized to shoot him dead on the spot. Right at this moment in the surveillance feed, that man named Qian Wenbo seemed to sense something. He closed the book and stood up. He pushed his glasses, glanced at his watch, and then he took his steps, walking toward the staircase exit without haste. The direction he was heading was precisely the third floor. Everyone in the entire monitoring room held their breath. The fish is finally about to bite the hook. Qian Wenbo's steps were very steady, and his posture was very relaxed, as if he were just an ordinary reader who was tired from reading and prepared to go upstairs to change his environment. Step by step, he walked up the stairs, his figure disappearing into the corner leading from the second floor to the third floor. The next second in the surveillance feed at the third floor staircase exit, his figure appeared. He arrived on the third floor. This is the intersection between the section C reading room and the locker area. According to the previous clearing plan, this place should be completely empty right now. Qian Wenbo stood in place and looked around. His gaze swept a circle through the empty corridor. His face still carried that gentle and elegant scholar expression, but his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. He was confirming the environment, confirming whether this place was a safe trap. Whether this place was a safe trap. A deathly silence filled the monitoring room. Everyone clenched their fists, terrified that making even a tiny sound would alarm the person in the video. Time seemed to be stretched out, with every second feeling as long as a century. Finally, Qian Wenbo seemed to finish his confirmation. He took his steps, heading straight toward the lockers in Section C. His objective was very clear. Locker number 307. He pulled a key out of his pocket. It wasn't an ordinary locker key, but a brass key with an ancient design. He inserted the key into the keyhole of locker number 307. Action, Xiao. Wenjun's voice sounded like a glacier fracturing, exploding in everyone's ears, before her voice even faded from both sides of the corridor that was originally completely empty. From behind the bookshelves and from the ventilation ducts in the ceiling, a dozen black figures instantly flashed out. Those were the top tactical team members of the Ministry of State Security. They were like specters, born from the shadows, noiseless yet fast as lightning. A specially made electromagnetic pulse net dropped from the sky, enveloping Qian Wenbo. Several black gun barrels pointed at his head from all directions. From the start of the action to the target being completely controlled, the entire process took less than 0.5 seconds. Qian Wenbo didn't even have time to complete the action of turning the key. The expression on his face froze, and that gentle and elegant scholar mask completely shattered at this moment, replaced by extreme shock, and a cluster of shattered, replaced instead by extreme shock, and a strange smile. Yes, he was smiling, with a dozen guns pointed at his head. He was actually smiling. Xiao, Wenjun and I had already rushed over from the staircase exit with our people. Qian Wenbo, you are under arrest. Xiao Wenjun held her gun, staring dead at him. Qian Wenbo didn't look at her. His gaze passed through everyone and landed on my face. His expression was very strange. No anger, no fear. Only a kind of playful, appreciative look, like a hunter looking at his prey. So you're the one from customs? He spoke, his voice completely different from his previous gentleness, hoarse low, and carrying a texture like grinding metal. It was you who saw through the raw stones. I didn't answer, only looking at him coldly. Impressive. He actually nodded, as if praising me. I didn't expect that in this country, besides those old guys among the gatekeepers, there would actually be a pair of eyes like yours. It seems ARC's intelligence system needs to be updated. Take him away, Xiao. When Jun barked sharply, 2 tactical team members immediately stepped forward, slapping specially made handcuffs on him. Search him. Another team began to conduct a body search on him and opened that locker number 307. The locker was empty inside with nothing at all, and the things searched from Qian Wenbo's body were also extremely simple. A wallet containing a few bank cards and a small amount of cash, an oldest model Nokia phone without any smartphone features, and that German edition of Faust. No weapons, no poison. No cipher book clean to a point that didn't look like an agent. Escort him to the interrogation room. With a wave of Xiao Wenjun's hand, Qian Wenbo was escorted past my side. He suddenly stopped his steps, tilted his head toward my ear, and whispered a sentence in a voice that only the 2 of us could hear. He said, "When you look into the abyss is also looking at you. Welcome to the real world." Finishing his words, he gave a smile and was pushed forward by the tactical team members. My back was instantly soaked in cold. Sweat and a bone-chilling coldness rushed from the soles of my feet straight to the crown of my head. This person knew of my existence. He wasn't here to make a contact. From the moment he entered the library, his target might have been me. This was a trap, a death trap aimed at me. "Watch out!" I reacted abruptly, roaring at the tactical team members. But it was already too late. At the exact split second when Qian Wenbo's body was about to be pushed into the elevator, his neck gave a violent twist at an angle impossible for a human being to achieve. With a crisp crack of bone snapping, he broke his own cervical spine. His body slumped down limply, his face still wearing that strange winner-like smile. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Everyone was stunned into speechless shock by this sudden scene. He's dead. The only clue committed suicide right in front of all of our faces, and in such a resolute, completely unimaginable way. The entire scene fell into a dead silence. "No." Xiao Wenjun looked at Qian Wenbo's corpse, her face pale as a ghost. "Quick, check that book." I suddenly remembered something, rushed over and pulled that copy of Faust out of the evidence bag. I frantically flipped through the pages. There was no false layer inside the pages, nor any markings. It was just an ordinary printed book. But when I flipped to the very last page, my pupils shrank fiercely. At the very bottom of the copyright page, below the publication date, there was a row of faint numbers written in pencil that had almost been erased. It wasn't a page number, nor was it a code, but a coordinate, a geographic coordinate of north latitude and east longitude. A coordinate, a geographic coordinate, north latitude x degrees, east longitude x degrees, but a coordinate instead. A geographical coordinate of north latitude and east longitude. A coordinate, a geographical coordinate, north latitude, xx degrees, east longitude, and x degrees. I picked up that copy of Faust and showed it to Xiao Wenjun. Her gaze fell upon that string of numbers, and her pupils suddenly constricted. "Locate it!" She turned around abruptly and roared at the technicians in the monitoring room. "Locate it for me right now! Locate these coordinates for me immediately." The tech team operated at lightning speed, and the huge screen on the wall instantly switched to a massive satellite map. A flashing red dot appeared on the map. Xiao Wenjun walked in front of the screen, staring dead at that red dot. "Where is this?" Her voice carried an irrepressible tremble. The technician quickly zoomed in on the map. The red dot was located in the suburbs of the capital, amidst a continuous, endless mountain range. Report team leader, the coordinates are located at the Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. The technician's voice also became extraordinarily tense. "Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center," Zhonglei muttered to himself, his face instantly turning pale as ghost. Xiao Wenjun's body gave a violent sway. She barely managed to stand steady by supporting herself on the table. "Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center." Her eyes stared dead at that red dot on the map, as if trying to pierce through it. "Isn't that a secret research base that has already been abandoned for 10 years? Her voice sounded like it came from an ice cave. "Why would the coordinates point there?" The entire monitoring room fell into a dead silence once again. Everyone was stunned into speechless shock by this sudden discovery. Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. What did this name mean to the insiders of the Ministry of State Security? It meant a taboo. It meant buried secrets, and it meant the nation's highest-level unknown experiments. 10 years ago, that base was urgently halted due to a sudden accident and was officially announced to the public as completely abandoned. All relevant data was classified as the nation's highest secret and sealed away permanently. and it couldn't even be mentioned. Now this clue left by Qian Wenbo, before his death, actually pointed right there. Kun Mountain. I looked at the map on the big screen at that red dot surrounded by mountains. My instinct told me that this matter was far more complex than we imagined. Zhuanghai, Xiao Wenjun suddenly turned. Red dot, my instinct, told me that this matter was far more complex than we imagined. Zhuanghai. Xiao Wenjun suddenly turned around and looked at me, her gaze becoming sharp once again. But this time there was no skepticism, only trust. Do you still remember mission 3 years ago where your mentor Lin Haidong sacrificed his life? That new type of contraband intercepted that time. What did the report state as their place of origin? My heart gave a violent leap. The report mentioned that that batch of goods was intercepted through a certain secret channel overseas. But at the internal briefing mentor, Lin had once said, that according to the scattered clues they tracked down the final destination of that batch of goods pointed to a secret laboratory close to the geographic location of the Kun Mountain range. As soon as my words landed, Xiao Wenjun's face completely shattered. She violently picked up the walkie-talkie. Headquarters urgent report from the Boulder Special Task Force leader Xiao Wenjun, requesting immediate activation of the highest-level emergency response contingency plan. Target Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. What Qian Wenbo left behind isn't an ordinary geographic coordinate. What he left behind is Pandora's box. Quick, contact the Air Force Command Center immediately. I want a helicopter right now, right this instant. At the same time, mobilize the nearest Special Operations Forces to lock down all areas surrounding the Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. No one is allowed to enter or leave. All top-secret data related to this center must be unsealed immediately and transmitted to my encrypted terminal. Roger. An anxious and rapid response came through the communication channel. The entire Ministry of State Security at this moment was completely set ablaze. Xiao Wenjun hung up the walkie-talkie, looking at me with an ice-cold gaze. Zhuanghai. We might be entangled in a vortex that exceeds our imagination. Qian Wenbo's death isn't the end, but the beginning. Her gaze looked once again toward that flashing red dot on the big screen. There it felt as if an invisible force was currently awakening. 10 minutes later, a military helicopter landed on the rooftop helipad of the National Digital Library. The massive roaring sound of the propellers was deafening. The helicopter landed on the rooftop helipad of the National Digital Library, the massive roaring sound of the propellers shattering the ears. Xiao Wenjun, Zhonglei, and I boarded the helicopter. The cabin door closed, and the helicopter lifted off the ground, soaring straight into the clouds. In the night curtain, it looked like a massive steel raptor, speeding away toward the direction of the suburban Kun Mountain range. The night wind howled. I sat in the cabin looking at the dimming lights receding continuously below. My heart, however, sank lower and lower. Those words of Qian Wenbo before his death echoed in my ears once again. When you look into the abyss is also looking at you. Welcome to the real world. This real world, just what on earth is hidden inside it? The Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. The raw stones. The death of my mentor. How on earth are all these connected? I took a deep breath and clenched my fists tightly. No matter what lies ahead, I am going to unearth it completely. The helicopter sped through the night scene. About 40 minutes later, we arrived above the Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. Looking down from the air, that was a massive architectural complex surrounded by mountains. The main body was a fortress-style building, with a gray concrete structure. The perimeter consisted of towering walls, covered with barbed wire and security cameras. The entire base was concealed by dense forests and treacherous mountain peaks. If one didn't specifically know of its existence, it would be completely impossible to notice what was hidden here. The helicopter landed on a flat piece of ground, at the perimeter of the base. Just as we stepped off the chopper, a damp and cold mountain wind rushed straight at our faces. The ground had already been completely controlled by the Special Operations Forces. Hundreds of fully armed Special Forces soldiers were lying in ambush around various corners of the perimeter of the base like ghosts. The team leader was a lean man around 40 years old, code-named Dark Wolf. He walked quickly to the front of Xiao Wenjun and saluted with a standard military salute. Report, Team Leader Xiao the Wolf. Fang Special Forces Brigade has completed deployment according to plan. All suspicious targets within a 1-kilometer radius have been cleared. No anomalies have been found inside the base for now. Deployment has been completed according to plan within a 1-kilometer radius. All suspicious targets have been cleared and no anomalies have been found inside the base for now. Xiao Wenjun nodded. Very well, let's go, Dark Wolf. Led us toward the main gate of the base, the heavy alloy. Gate was tightly closed, covered in rust, looking as if it hadn't been opened for 10 years. Xiao Wenjun pulled out her encrypted terminal. A few seconds later, the alloy gate let out a heavy rumbling sound, slowly opening up. A wave of ice-cold, damp, and moldy air rushed out from the inside, straight at us. Inside was a pitch-black corridor. Deep within the corridor, nothing could be seen, as if it led to an unknown abyss. Dark Wolf signaled 2 Special Forces soldiers to go ahead and scout the way. They held machine guns and turned on their tactical flashlights. 2 beams of intense light cut through the darkness, illuminating the interior of the corridor. It was completely empty inside, with only a mottled, no entry warning sign on the wall. Xiao Wen. June waved her hand and our group filed inside. The interior of the base was much larger than it looked from the outside. Along both sides of the corridor were tightly closed laboratory doors, and every door was pasted with various dense warning slogans: biological contamination, high-risk experiment, unauthorized proximity prohibited. 10 years of abandonment had filled this place with the stench of decay. The walls and pipes were all covered with a thick layer of dust, and moss had even grown on the floor. Report! A Special Forces soldier suddenly stopped his steps, pointing at a main door on the left side. This door has traces of being pried open. Xiao Wenjun walked forward with quick steps. That door looked a bit newer than the other doors, and the position of the door lock had obvious traces of damage. Dark Wolf signaled the Special Forces soldiers to breach the door. With a loud crash, the door was violently rammed open. Inside was a spacious laboratory. In the center of the laboratory, a massive metal petri dish stood there quietly. The petri dish was filled with a certain amber-colored liquid, and an irregular object was submerged in the liquid, one that was extremely identical to the raw stones we intercepted at the airport. Submerged in the liquid was an irregular object, an object extremely similar to the raw stones we intercepted at the airport, but the raw stone inside this petri dish was much larger in volume, a full half-person high. It was like a massive, ugly tumor, floating quietly inside the amber-colored liquid, and around it dense networks of conduits and lines were connected. These conduits and lines ultimately converged at a massive control console. The screen on the control console emitted a faint green glow, displaying various complex biological data and energy toxins upon it. What on earth is this? Zhonglei looked at everything before his eyes, his Adam's apple moving up and down. The raw stone is actually alive. My eyes stared dead at that massive raw stone inside the petri dish. It wasn't static. Its surface was currently undergoing a certain subtle squirming at an extremely slow speed, as if it were currently breathing. Dark Wolf, Xiao Wenjun's face completely shattered. Lock down this laboratory immediately. No one is allowed to get close. Test the surrounding air-water quality and soil right now. I need to know if there is a risk of biological leakage. Here. Dark Wolf immediately issued the orders. The Special Forces soldiers rapidly set up a cordon. Line and the biochemical testing squad also immediately put on protective suits to enter the laboratory for testing. Xiao Wenjun walked to the front of the control console, her hands operating at flying speed. Her encrypted terminal established a connection with the control console, and a massive amount of encrypted data began to transfer. Team leader! A technician suddenly let out a cry of alarm. The test results are out. The air! His hands operated rapidly, his encrypted terminal connected with the console, and a massive amount of encrypted data began to transfer. Team leader! A technician suddenly exclaimed. The test results are out. The air and the soil are all normal. But, he pointed at the instrument in his hand, the energy fluctuation inside the laboratory is extremely violent. Just like a super high-power nuclear reactor, continuously outputting energy. A nuclear reactor, a single raw stone, can actually emit the energy of a nuclear reactor. This is too unbelievable. Xiao Wenjun, a single raw stone, can actually emit the energy of a nuclear reactor. This is simply too unbelievable. Xiao Wenjun stood up from the control console abruptly, her gaze falling upon that massive petri dish. Once again, her eyes filled with solemnity. Chen Wenbo's objective was this. Her voice was very low. He wasn't here to steal 3 small raw stones. He came to activate this big one. My brain instantly went completely blank. Activating this massive, living raw stone that possesses energy like a nuclear reactor? What on earth is this thing? And right at this moment, a rapid, beeping alarm sounded from Xiao Wenjun's encrypted terminal. She looked down, and her face instantly turned ash gray. Not good, Qian. Wenbo's geographic coordinate wasn't the final destination. It was merely a key used to activate a certain specific device. The Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center is just a signal relay station. The real destination is much deeper inside that taboo zone we have never touched. Much deeper. Zhonglei's Adam's apple moved up and down once again, his eyes filled with terror. This place is already the limit of where we can reach. Going deeper, there's only the legendary taboo zone. There lies the nation's highest level defense, and even the blueprints aren't disclosed to the public. Xiao. Wenjun didn't pay attention to him. Her eyes stared dead at the map on her encrypted terminal. A brand new, even more secretive coordinate was currently flashing right there. That coordinate was located deep underground beneath the Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center. Dark Wolf. She looked at Dark Wolf abruptly. Gather all demolition experts immediately. I need you to blast open the corridor leading to that taboo zone in the shortest time possible. Dark Wolf's face also became extraordinarily solemn. Team Leader Xiao, I'm afraid this won't do. The defense level of the taboo zone was designed according to nuclear bunker standards. Even if it is our Special Forces Brigade's most advanced demolition device, it would still take at least 20 hours just to blast open a single crack. 20 hours? Xiao Wenjun's eyes filled with despair. We don't have that much time. An hour? Xiao Wenjun's eyes filled with despair. We don't have that much time. Gao Yuan said the contact time was 3 p.m. today. Qian. Wenbo appeared at this library at 3 p.m. precisely to delay us, and by time. He detonated the coordinates to activate the raw stone. Here, and his true purpose was to trigger the deeper taboo zone. If I haven't guessed wrong, the device inside this taboo zone is already being activated right now. Her gaze looked once again toward that massive, raw stone inside the Petri dish. The squirming on its surface began to accelerate, and the amber-colored liquid also began to emit a faint purple light. This big raw stone, I spoke up suddenly, it's an energy converter itself. It absorbs a certain energy between heaven and earth, and then through the coordinates left by Qian, Wenbo converts it into a specific signal. This signal will be used to activate the deeper taboo zone. Qian Wenbo's purpose wasn't to smuggle small raw stones out, but to send something into the taboo zone. My words made Xiao Wenjun's eyes light up abruptly. Yes, she slapped her hands together. You're right, inside the taboo zone. It's said that a mysterious object from outer space, discovered by our country in the early days, is buried there. That object was named by the highest level secret, clearance as God's Key. Back then, precisely because we couldn't decode it. The Kun Mountain Biological Sciences Research Center was established, and secret research was launched. Later, because an uncontrollable accident occurred. During the research process, we had no choice but to abandon it. The gift from heaven, the God's Key, that Qian Wenbo mentioned refers precisely to it. The ARC organization doesn't want raw stones. What they want is this God's Key. And these raw stones are the energy cells to boot up the God's Key. Gao Yuan was just a runner, and Qian Wenbo was the activator. Their real purpose is to utilize the energy of these raw stones, to manipulate or even awaken the God's Key deep inside the taboo zone. Xiao Wenjun's face grew more and more solemn. Once the key... Xiao Wenjun's face grew more and more solemn. Once the God's Key is awakened, its consequences are completely beyond our prediction. It might destroy everything we have, Dark Wolf. Tell me, is there any other way to enter the taboo zone? Dark Wolf pondered for a moment. There is one. He raised his head to look at Xiao Wenjun. After that accident 10 years ago, to prevent an uncontrollable situation from occurring inside the taboo zone, we secretly designed an emergency self-destruct tunnel. Once an uncontrollable situation occurs inside the taboo zone, high energy matter can be directly injected from this tunnel to destroy it completely. But this tunnel only allows one-way entry. The person who goes in can never come out again. Furthermore, the interior of the tunnel is filled with all kinds of bizarre mechanisms and deadly traps. We have never conducted a field test, and no one has ever truly walked through it. Xiao Wenjun's gaze instantly became resolute. Take me there. Team leader Xiao, Dark Wolf, and Zhong Li cried out in alarm at the same time. You can't go. You are the head of the task force. You can't take this risk. The situation inside the taboo zone is unknown and full of dangers. I am the team leader, Xiao Wenjun barked sharply. Only my authority is the highest here. Only I can disarm all alarms and protective measures. Only I can lead you guys inside Zhuanghai. She suddenly looked at me. Come with me, I need your instinct and I need your eyes. I didn't hesitate. Good. My answer was decisive. I understood that this was no longer a matter concerning just me alone. This was for the country, for the nation, and for the safety of all of us. A flash of admiration crossed Dark Wolf's eyes. He didn't say anything more. He turned around and led us toward another concealed corner deep within the base. There stood an alloy door that looked no different from an ordinary wall. But under the operation of Xiao Wenjun's encrypted terminal, the alloy door slowly opened once again. Inside was a tunnel that was even deeper, pitch blacker, and colder than before. At the entrance of the tunnel stood a red warning sign, with only 4 words written upon it. Trespassers beware. I took a deep breath, raised my head to look. Raised my head to look at Xiao Wenjun. Her expression was extraordinarily calm. Let's go. She was the first to step into that path of no return leading to the taboo zone. I followed closely behind her while Zhonglei and Dark Wolf led the remaining Special Forces soldiers to guard the tunnel entrance. Remember, before the tunnel closes, Xiao. Wenjun's voice came from the inside. No matter what happens, without my order, no one is allowed to get close to the taboo zone. By even half a step, violators will be shot on sight. The alloy door slowly closed behind us. We were completely isolated within this unknown darkness. Only our own heartbeats remained in our ears, along with an increasingly intense aura of death. This place is the taboo zone. This place is the real world Chan Wenbo talked about. Next, just what on earth is waiting for us? A dead silence filled the tunnel. The alloy door behind us completely cut off all our connections with the outside world. The darkness enveloped us from all directions like thick ink, cold damp, and carrying a bizarre odor that mixed metallic rust and dust. Together, Xiao Wenjun turned on her tactical flashlight. A beam of bright white light pierced through this darkness that had been silent for 10 years. Wherever the beam of light reached, there was a narrow, bottomless walkway. The walls weren't a concrete structure, but a never-before-seen metallic surface gleaming with a dark silver luster, extremely smooth, without any joints, as if the entire tunnel had been forcibly carved out from a single massive piece of metal. This is the highest-grade military alloy from 10 years ago. Xiao Wenjun's voice sounded a bit hollow in the empty tunnel. Theoretically, it can withstand the impact of a small nuclear blast. As she spoke, she pulled a pistol from her waist and skillfully disarmed the safety. Keep close to me. From now on, we are entering a level 1 combat readiness state. Any unconfirmed living thing can be regarded as a hostile target. I nodded, elevating my senses to the absolute limit. My eyes had already adapted to the darkness here. Even without the flashlight beam, I could barely make out the surrounding outlines. My instinct, like a high-speed radar, scanned every single inch of space around us. The tunnel was very long. We walked for about 5 minutes. Beneath our feet was a metal floor made of the exact same material, and every step we took let out a crisp, yet lonely echo: tap, tap, tap. This sound was the only melody here. Suddenly my heart tightened for no reason. A powerful sense of crisis rushed over from right head. Stop! I shouted, subconsciously grabbing Xiao Wenjun's arm in a firm grip. Xiao Wenjun's reaction was extremely fast. At the split second I spoke up, she had already stopped her steps, her gun barrel pointing forward, her body tightly braced like a bow. What is it? She asked, lowering her voice. There's something ahead. My voice was a bit dry. I can't feel what it is, but it's very dangerous. Xiao. Wenjun cast the flashlight beam toward the further distance ahead. At the end of the light beam, the tunnel was still empty, without any anomalies. Are you sure? Sure. I stared into the darkness ahead, cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. That sense of crisis grew stronger and stronger, just like an invisible eye, gazing at us coldly in the darkness. Xiao. Wenjun didn't question my judgment anymore. She took a compact glow stick out from her tactical vest, cracked it bright, and then threw it forward with all her might. The green glow stick drew a bright parabola, in the air, flying about 50 meters away. The wire flew about 50 meters away, and then landing lightly on the ground. The exact split second that glow stick hit the floor, a freakish change suddenly occurred. In the tunnel right ahead of us, the smooth, mirror-like metal walls, ceiling and floor instantly lit up with countless dense blood-red beams of light. These beams crisscrossed and connected with one another within 0.1 seconds, forming a massive, deadly 3-dimensional laser grid. That glow stick that had fallen to the floor was instantly sliced into nothingness by this silent red laser, forming a deadly 3-dimensional laser grid. That glow stick that had fallen to the floor was instantly by this silent red laser sliced into countless microscopic particles, leaving behind not even a single trace of smoke or dust. Xiao. Wenjun and I gasped in horror, at the same time cold sweat instantly soaking our backs. If we had taken just one more step forward a moment ago, our fate right now would be exactly the same as that glow stick, not a single shred of bone left behind. An infrared-triggered laser array. Xiao. Wenjun's voice carried a tremble of lingering fear. This is the military's top-tier defense system. Once triggered, no living organism can pass through. She looked at me, her eyes filled with astonishment. How did you find out? Instinct. I could only answer that way. The laser array, after flashing for about 3 seconds, silently vanished once again. The tunnel ahead returned to darkness as if nothing had ever happened. But we both knew that that net of death was still lying in wait right there for the next intruder. What do we do? I asked. This kind of system must have a pattern to its operation. Xiao. Wenjun forced herself to calm down rapidly. It's either a fixed time interval or a specific bypass passcode. We don't have the passcode, so we can only wait for its energy to deplete or find its shutdown gap. And so we waited quietly in this darkness. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That net of death never appeared again. Strange. Xiao. Wenjun frowned. To save energy, conventional defense systems always employ a pulse-style activation. It's impossible for it to remain constantly in a standby state unless... She seemed to think of something. Unless its trigger mechanism isn't object movement. She pulled something out of her pocket once again. This time it was a tiny metal sphere. She didn't throw it out, but instead lightly placed it on the floor and then used her foot to slowly nudge it forward. The metal sphere rolled silent, fly across the smooth floor. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. Nothing happened. Xiao. The metal sphere rolled silently across the smooth floor. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. Nothing happened. Xiao won. Jun's expression grew more and more solemn. It's not infrared sensing, nor is it vibration sensing. Then what on earth is its trigger logic? I stared at that metal sphere rolling in the darkness, and a wild thought flashed through my mind. It's sound, I blurted out. What triggers it is sound, that glow. Stick just now made a slight noise when it hit the floor, while this metal sphere is solid and makes almost zero noise when rolling. Xiao. Wenjun's pupils contracted fiercely. She seemed to understand something as well. She slowly raised her hand and made a gesture to keep quiet. Then she pointed at her own throat and then pointed ahead, her meaning obvious. For the remaining path, we must maintain absolute silence and cannot make any sound, including the sound of breathing and heartbeats. This was an almost impossible task to complete, but we had no other choice. We looked at each other, both seeing a shred of resolution in the other's eyes. I took a deep breath, and then adjusted my breathing frequency to the absolute lowest, and my heartbeat slowed down along with it. Like two ghosts, step by step extreme. Slowly we stepped into that area enveloped by death. Every single step felt like walking on a knife's edge. My entire focus was concentrated on my own footsteps and breathing, terrified of making even the slightest sound. Time at this moment became incredibly prolonged. That short distance of 100 meters took us a full half hour to walk. When I finally stepped out of that area, only then did I realize that my combat. Our uniforms were completely drenched in sweat. We made it. We just walked right out from under. He walked over, filled with relief after surviving the ordeal. Before the joy of surviving the disaster could even well up in our hearts, at the end of the corridor ahead of us, a door appeared, an alloy door, that was left slightly ajar. A sliver of faint pale light leaked through the gap. At the end of the corridor ahead, a door appeared, an alloy door left slightly ajar. A sliver of faint pale light leaked from the gap, accompanied by a thick, nauseating, bloody stench wafting out from within. Xiao Wenjun and I exchanged a glance, and he made a tactical hand sign. He would lead the assault while I covered, hanging left and right against the wall. We slowly approached that door. My heart jumped to my throat again. Xiao Wenjun violently kicked open the main door, then rolled inside. I followed tightly, behind him, muzzle aiming into the room. However, when we clearly saw the scene, inside the room both of us were completely stunned. This was a massive circular central control room about the size of a basketball court. Countless massive display screens were embedded in the surrounding walls. But at this moment, all the screens were pitch black. Only an emergency light on an altar-like elevated platform right in the center of the room was lit, emitting a pale and weak glow. The entire control room was a total mess. Desks and chairs were overturned, documents were scattered everywhere, and a thick layer of dust covered everything, as if time here had been frozen 10 years ago. At the exact moment that disaster struck, and the source of that strong, bloody stench was right below that platform. Over a dozen corpses lay there wearing white research coats, already turned into dried skeletons, but the way they died was exceptionally horrifying. Some bled from their 7 facial orifices, with distorted expressions as if they had seen something intensely terrifying before dying. Others had their bodies twisted at bizarre angles, their bones completely crushed, and on others a massive hole had been opened in their chests by a certain sharp weapon. The blood had long since coagulated into a dark brown, permanently gluing them and the cold metal floor together. This was the scene of that accident from 10 years ago, a scene of a living hell on earth, permanently gluing them together. This was the scene of that accident from 10 years ago, a scene of a living hell on earth. They were all the core researchers of the Kun Mountain project back then. Xiao Wenjun's voice carried a suppressed tremble. As she slowly walked toward those corpses, her eyes filled with grief and rage. My mentor. Professor Wu Zhongtian was also one of the leaders of this project back then. After the accident occurred, he was listed as a missing person. I've never believed he would die in a place like this. Her gaze searched through the skeletons, one by one, as if trying to find that familiar figure. I didn't disturb her. I maintained a high level of vigilance, observing this bizarre control room. My instinct told me that this place was even more dangerous than that laser corridor from before. The danger here wasn't on a physical level, but a massive sense of oppression coming from a mental level, as if the air were pervaded by an invisible malicious energy. It was prying into our thoughts and eroding our will. My gaze landed on that high platform. In the center of the platform, there was a massive, circular indentation. The indentation was completely empty, but on the edge of the indentation, I saw some strange, purple crystal matter, its color identical to the glowing filaments inside the raw stones. We intercepted at the airport. This is the place where God's key was placed, I muttered to myself. 10 years ago. It disappeared from right here. No, it didn't disappear. Xiao Wenjun walked over, her expression exceptionally ugly. It was unleashed. She pointed at the researchers' corpses. Look at their wounds. They don't look like they were caused by weapons. It looks more like their bodies were exploded from the inside by a certain energy. She walked to the front of a skeleton and knelt down. That skeleton maintained an extremely painful posture. His hands were clutching his own skull in a firm grip, as if trying to crush his own head. Maintained an extremely painful posture. His hands were clutching his own skull in a firm grip, as if trying to crush his own head with sheer force. Xiao Wenjun found something between his phalanges, a black voice recorder that had been severely deformed from being squeezed. She tried pressing the play button. Bzz, bzz. After a burst of ear-piercing static, a man's distorted, howling voice came from the recorder due to extreme terror. No, don't sing anymore. Stop quickly, stop. His song is poisonous. It's drilling into my bra. Following a tragic shriek that didn't even sound human, the recording abruptly ended. Xiao Wenjun and I looked at each other, a chill rushing from our tailbones straight to the crowns of our heads. A song? What song? We hadn't heard any sound here besides our own heartbeats. Wait, no sound. I suddenly realized an extremely terrifying detail ever since we entered this control room. It had been a bit too quiet here. No operating sound from any instruments, no sound from any ventilation systems, and it felt like even our own footsteps had been swallowed up by this dead silence. This place was an absolutely silent space. Buzz. Even the sound seemed to be swallowed by this dead silence. This place was an absolutely quiet space. Buzz. The exact split second I realized this point, a burst of severe pain suddenly hit my brain, as if countless steel needles were piercing into my temples at the same time. A bizarre voice that was impossible to describe with words without any warning rang out directly within the depths of my mind. That wasn't a sound heard through the ears. That was a stream of information directly acting upon the mental level. It was like a chaotic melody filled with madness and malice, the song of a demon from another world. Zhuanghai, I heard Xiao Wenjun's anxious shout, but I couldn't respond. My consciousness was currently being rapidly swallowed by that terrifying melody. Before my eyes, various illusions began to appear. I saw Gao Yuan's terror-stricken face, saw Qian Wenbo's bizarre smile, and saw my mentor, Lin Haidong, lying in the pool of blood. Rage, grief, fear. Bizarre smile, and saw my mentor, Lin Haidong, lying in a pool of blood. Rage, grief, fear. All negative emotions were infinitely magnified at this moment. My sanity was rapidly collapsing. I'm going crazy, but wake up. The exact split second before I was about to be swallowed by the darkness, a sharp, Loud slap was violently delivered to my face. The intense pain instantly snapped me back to consciousness a bit. I saw Xiao Wenjun's face, which was written full of anxiety and worry. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, and her lips were trembling violently. Obviously, she had also suffered the attack of the song, but her willpower was stronger than mine. She actually relied on biting the tip of her own tongue to maintain consciousness. Block it out. She hissed at me with all the strength in her body. Don't listen, don't think, hold on to your consciousness. This is a psychic attack. I clenched my teeth, the taste of blood spreading through my mouth. I tried to concentrate all my attention on the pain to resist that all-permeating song, but it was useless. That song grew clearer and clearer, wilder and wilder. My vision began to blur. I knew I was about to reach my limit, and right at this moment, at my chest, that keepsake of my mentor Lin Haidong, that I had always kept close to my body, an ordinary customs badge, suddenly emitted a faint, warm energy. This energy was like a clear spring, instantly flowing through my entire body and surging into my brain. Faced with this warm energy, that wild and chaotic song rapidly receded as if it had met its absolute nemesis. My brain regained clarity, and that intense pain vanished along with it. I panted heavily in huge gulps, my entire body looking like it had just been fished out of the water. You're fine now, Xiao Wenjun. I panted heavily in huge gulps, my entire body looking like it had just been fished out of the water. You're fine now, Xiao Wen. June looked at me, her eyes filled with disbelief. I nodded, supporting myself against the wall to barely stand steady. I looked down at the badge on my chest. That badge, at this moment, was emitting a faint, almost imperceptible, golden aura. It was it that saved me. What is that? Xiao Wenjun also noticed the anomaly of the badge. My mentor's keepsake, I answered. I don't know why it glows, but it seems able to fend off this psychic attack, Xiao. Wenjun's gaze became incomparably complex. She looked at that badge, and then looked at me as if trying to find some secret on my body. And right at this moment, rumble, rumble, the entire central control room suddenly vibrated violently. Those pitch-black screens on the walls actually all lit up at this moment. What appeared on the screens wasn't data, nor was it surveillance feeds, but an eye. An incomparably massive, bizarre eye covered in countless purple lines. That eye slowly turned its pupil, ultimately locking on to Xiao Wenjun and me. A cold, emotionless, synthesized voice resounded through the entire control room. Unknown lifeform intrusion detected. Full line key detected. Arc plan phase 2 initiated. Target purge. Protocol evolution. Arc plan. Xiao Wenjun's face instantly turned pale as ghost. Qianwen, Bo's organization, they actually control this place. Before her words, even faded on top of the high platform, that circular indentation, which was originally empty, its bottom slowly cracked open a gap, a cylindrical lift platform forged from an unknown metal, rose up from below. The lift platform was carrying an object. That was a massive, irregular sphere, rose up from below. The lift platform was carrying an object. That was a massive, irregular sphere pieced together by countless irregular crystals flashing with purple light. Its size was about the same as a small car. Its surface was covered with countless deep eye-like vortexes. Those vortexes were slowly turning, emitting an evil aura that made one's heart shudder. God's key. I looked at that massive sphere, my throat going dry. This is the ultimate secret that the country sought for 10 years and hid for 10 years. An ominous object from outer space. It is the source of everything. Buzz. The massive sphere let out a low rumble. The vibration of the entire control room became even more violent. The surrounding walls began to crack open, one massive gap after another. Countless thick, tentacle-like black metal cables drilled out from the gaps. Like a pack of awakened giant pythons, they fiercely lunged toward us. Watch out! Xiao Wenjun roared, pulling me to find a nearby control console to use as cover. Boom! Just as we ducked away, a massive metal cable smashed heavily onto the position where we were standing just now. The hard alloy floor was instantly smashed into a massive, deep crater. More cables flanked us from all directions, sealing off all our paths of retreat. Bang, 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 bang. Xiao Wenjun raised her pistol and fired wildly at those lunging cables. The bullets hit the surface of the cables, bursting into a succession of sparks, but could only leave shallow white dots upon them, completely unable to cause any substantial damage. It's useless, I shouted. These things are the base's defense system itself. Conventional weapons are ineffective against them. We must find the control core to shut it down. The control core is right on that sphere. Xiao Wenjun also understood my meaning. But right now we are being firmly pinned down behind the cover by these crazy metal tentacles. completely unable to get close to that high platform, watching the encirclement grow smaller and smaller, unable to get close to that high platform, watching the encirclement grow smaller and smaller. We are about to be crushed into meat paste by these metal tentacles. "Cover me, Xiao," Wenjun suddenly shouted to me. "Buy me 3 seconds." Finishing her words, she pulled the last item. Out from her tactical vest, a silver diamond-shaped bomb that was only thumb-sized. A high-energy polymer bomb. I recognized that thing. That was top-secret level special equipment of the Ministry of State Security. Its power enough to blast through a 1-meter-thick steel plate. But its detonation time requires 3 seconds. During these 3 seconds, she will become a living target. "No, it's too dangerous," I vetoed immediately. "There's no time." Xiao Wenjun's gaze was incomparably resolute. "This is our only way out." She didn't give me another chance to object, rolling out from behind the cover. "Now's the time," I roared, pouring out all the remaining bullets left in my gun. What I shot at wasn't those cables, but the ceiling above their heads, those aging lines, and pipes on the ceiling were hit by the bullets, instantly bursting with a large amount of electrical sparks and steam. For a time, the entire control room was shrouded by dense smoke and blinding electric light. The vision of those metal cables was briefly obstructed. It was precisely this precious 1 second that allowed Xiao Wenjun to rush beneath the high platform. She pressed the bomb's activation button, and then used all the strength in her body to throw it toward that massive, purple sphere. "Get down!" She let out a final howl at me, and then her whole body was violently whipped away by a metal cable that had reacted. "No!" My eyes almost split as I watched her body slam against the distant wall like a falling leaf, and then slide limply to the ground, her life or death unknown. Meanwhile, that silver bomb drew a desperate arc in the air. While that silver bomb drew a desperate arc in the air, clinging precisely onto the surface of that massive sphere. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Boom! An earth-shattering roar loud enough to tear eardrums erupted. The entire world turned into a blinding sheet of pure white before my eyes. The terrifying shockwave instantly swept through the entire control room. I felt like I had been hit head-on by a high-speed train, my body thrown high up, and then slammed heavily onto the ground. My consciousness, amidst the intense pain and roaring, rapidly drifted away, before completely losing consciousness. I seemed to see that massive purple sphere wasn't destroyed in the center of the explosion. Only a crack was blasted open on its surface. A stream of purple-black energy, blacker than the abyss and purer than the universe, slowly flowed out from the crack. The final image of the entire world was that massive eye covering the entire screen. A trace of a humanized, mocking smile flashed within its pupil, and then everything returned to darkness. I didn't know how long I had been unconscious, maybe a minute, maybe a century. My consciousness was forcibly dragged back into my body amidst a sharp roaring and intense pain. I woke up. The entire world was shaking. My head felt as if it had been smashed heavily by a sledgehammer, hurting so much it was about to split. In my ears was a continuous high-frequency buzzing sound. I tried. My head ached as if it were splitting open, and a continuous high-frequency buzzing rang in my ears. I tried, trying to open my eyes. Everything before me was a complete blur with countless black spots, dancing wildly across my field of vision. I tasted the flavor of blood, both salty and metallic. It flowed down from my forehead, blurring my eyes. I tasted the flavor of blood, both salty and metallic. It flowed down from my forehead, blinding my vision. I raised my hand, wanting to wipe away the bloodstains on my face, only to find that my arms felt as heavy as lead. Every single microscopic movement pulled at the muscles of my entire body, bringing a heart-wrenching pain. I propped myself against the floor, struggling and wanting to sit up, but failed several times, ultimately relying on an overturned metal plate to barely prop up my upper body. My vision finally slowly regained clarity. And then I saw the scene before my eyes. The term living hell surfaced in my mind once again. The entire control room had completely turned into a field of ruins. The control console we were hiding behind earlier had been torn to shreds by the shockwave. Those menacing metal cables on the ceiling hung down limply like dead giant pythons, with dangerous electrical sparks still flashing at the snapped ends. The massive screens on the walls were all shattered, completely pitch black. The air was pervaded by the pungent smell of gunpowder and the scent of scorched protein from something being burned. The power of that high-energy polymer bomb completely exceeded my imagination. It had destroyed almost everything here. My gaze pierced through the pervading smoke and dust, casting toward that high platform. The high platform was still there, and on top of it, that massive, irregular purple sphere. was also still there. It floated quietly right there with a menacing crack added to its surface, not having been destroyed. That pure purple-black energy that had been flowing out from the crack earlier had already vanished without a trace. It was just like an opened Pandora's box. The disaster inside had already been released while the box itself returned to a dead silence, a dead-like state. My heart suddenly took a heavy dive. Xiao Wenjun. I suddenly thought of her. Returned to a dead-like state. My heart suddenly took a heavy dive. Xiao Wenjun. I suddenly thought of her, that woman who a split second ago had been fiercely whipped away by the metal cable. Like a madman, I began to search for her figure amidst the ruins. Xiao Wenjun. I hissed her name hoarsely, my voice sounding so weak, so powerless in the empty and dead silent control room. Xiao Wenjun, answer me? No one answered. Only my echo bounced back and forth between the ice-cold metal walls. Terror, like an ice-cold hand, firmly gripped my heart. Is she dead to protect me to complete the mission? Is she dead? No, I don't believe it. I endured the intense pain throughout my entire body, using both hands and feet to crawl through the ruins, moving away those heavy metal fragments one by one. My fingers were sliced, dripping wet with fresh blood by the sharp edges, but I couldn't feel the pain. I had only one single thought: find her. I must find her. I need to see her alive, or see her corpse if she's dead. Finally, behind a heap of collapsed server cabinets, I found her. She lay there quietly, her body covered completely with dust and rubble. Her face was as pale as paper, without a single shred of color. A thread of bright red blood hung from the corner of her mouth. Her combat suit was sliced open in several places, and blood soaked her clothes. She kept her eyes closed, motionless, as if she no longer had a breath. My brain went buzz, turning completely blank. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. I reached out my hand tremblingly, reaching toward her breath. Cold, a sheet of complete coldness. My world instantly collapsed. The exact split second before I was about to be swallowed by despair, my fingertips seemed to catch an extremely faint, almost imperceptible air flow. Extremely faint, but truly existing. She's still alive. She still has. A breath, wild joy like a burst of floodwater in a dead end, instantly broke through all despair and pain. I carefully brushed away the rubble on her body and carried her out from the ruins. Her body felt very light, very cold. I pressed my ear flat against her chest. I heard it. I heard that faint yet incomparably resilient heartbeat, thump-thump like a dying butterfly, struggling with all its might to flap its wings. I checked her injuries. They were very severe. Her left arm showed an unnatural bend, clearly fractured. There was a huge patch of bruising on her back, likely from suffering a violent impact. Her internal organs might already be damaged. The most fatal part was the wound on her forehead, a deep gash showing. The bone and blood was still leaking outward without stopping. I must stop her bleeding immediately. I tore off my own relatively clean sleeve and pressed it down hard on her wound. But it was useless. The blood quickly soaked through the cloth. If this goes on, she will die from excessive blood loss. What should I do? There's zero medical equipment here, and we are trapped in this isolated, godforsaken place. Looking at her face that was growing paler and paler due to blood loss, my heart twisted like a knife. Right at this moment, that customs badge belonging to my mentor Lin Haidong on my chest once again emitted a faint, warm energy, as if possessed by ghosts. I took off that badge and placed it gently onto the wound on Xiao Wenjun's forehead. A miracle happened. The split second that ice-cold metal badge made contact with her wound, it actually emitted a ring of soft golden light. A ring of soft golden light. That light aura, as if possessing life, enveloped her wound. The blood that was originally still surging out continuously, actually at a speed visible to the naked eye, slowly stopped. The flesh around the wound even began to slowly knit and heal itself. I was stunned into speechlessness by this unimaginable sight before me. This badge. Just what on earth is it? It can not only fend off psychic attacks, but actually heal wounds. Mentor, just what kind of an incomprehensible secret did you leave behind for me? I didn't have time to look deeper into it. I only knew that Xiao Wenjun was temporarily out of life-threatening danger. I let out a sigh of relief, slumping to the ground as if completely spent. The exhaustion of surviving a disaster surged over like a tide. I leaned against the wall, panting heavily in huge gulps, and right at this moment, the peripheral vision of my eyes caught the other side of the control room. Those skeletons of the researchers who were supposed to have been dead for 10 years. They moved. That wasn't an illusion. I saw it clearly. Those dozen-plus white skeletons scattered around the high platform were in an extremely slow and extremely bizarre posture, trembling slightly as if a certain invisible force was currently awakening them from their deep slumber of death. My blood instantly froze. A chill even more intense than when facing the metal tentacles just now, surged from the soles of my feet straight to the crown of my head. Subconsciously, I shielded the unconscious Xiao Wenjun, behind me raising my gun to aim at those skeletons that were undergoing an abnormal change. But my hand was trembling violently out of control. What was I looking at? I saw those dried-up brown bloodstains. At this moment actually becoming fresh again, Like tiny purple-black venomous snakes, they slithered across the floor and drilled back into the bodies of those skeletons. That was the ominous energy leaking out from the crack of God's key. It hadn't vanished. It had found new hosts. Crack. Crack. Bursts of tooth-grinding bone friction sounds echoed inside the dead, silent control room. Those skeletons lying on the ground, their bones were being forcibly rearranged and pieced together. They were slowly standing up. No, that wasn't standing. Their bodies in a twisted posture, completely defying human anatomy, were being forcibly propped up by that purple-black energy. Some things began to grow out upon their bodies. Some translucent crystal matter flashing with a bizarre purple light. These crystals, like the most greedy, parasitic vines, drilled out from the gaps of their bones wildly, devouring their skeletons, flesh and remnant clothing, and then multiplied and spread at a terrifying speed. In just a few dozen seconds, those skeletons had completely changed their appearance. They were no longer in human form, but had turned into grotesque human-shaped monsters made of purple crystals. Their bodies presented a bizarre, translucent texture. Through that layer of crystal shell, one could even see the black energy flowing slowly inside. Their heads had no facial features, only a smooth, mirror-like crystal plane. They had no weapons, and didn't even make any sound. They just stood quietly in place like that. A dozen pairs of non-existent eyes stood. In place, a dozen pairs of non-existent eyes turning in unison toward the direction where Xiao Wenjun and I were located. That moment, I felt as if my very soul had been frozen. What I was facing was no longer any known, understandable enemy, but a pure horror of the abyss. From outside human cognition, they were looking at us, they were scrutinizing us, they were judging us. This brought a deeper sense of despair than any wild howling and attacks. Right at this moment, Xiao Wenjun in my arms let out a groan of pain. She woke up. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly, and then she slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze was still a bit confused and empty at first, but when she clearly saw the scene before her, unconcealable shock surfaced for the first time inside those eyes of hers that were always as calm as ice. What the hell are those things? Her voice was hoarse, weak, and completely filled with disbelief. Don't move! I pressed down on her body as she tried to struggle and sit up. It's the energy of God's key. It contaminated those corpses. Xiao Wenjun's body gave a violent shudder. She obviously understood what this meant as well. Arc Plan Phase 2, she muttered to herself. Protocol Purge. So this is their purge. They want to turn this place into their nest. Xiao Wenjun's body shuddered violently. He clearly understood what this implied. Arc Project Phase 2, he muttered to himself. Purge and eliminate. So this is their purification. They want to turn this place into their nest. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. A nest. Don't tell me these crystal monsters are the new species Ark wants to create. Crystal life form composed entirely of that evil energy. Just as we were talking, those crystal monsters made a new move. One of them, the closest to us, slowly raised its arm. No, that could no longer be called an arm. That was a crystal blade pieced together by countless purple crystals, gleaming with a sharp, cold light, pieced together by crystals. Gleaming with a sharp, cold light, the crystal blade pointed right at us. Then its body began to melt. Like a wax statue scorched by high heat, its body rapidly turned into a puddle of purple viscous liquid. That puddle of liquid spread at lightning speed across the floor, flowing toward us as if possessing a life of its own. Its goal wasn't to attack us, but to modify us. It wants to turn us into monsters like them, too. Run without time to think, I threw the weak Xiao Wenjun onto my back and turned to bolt. My brain was working at overdrive. The exit was blocked. This place had already turned into a desperate sealed cage. Where else can we go? The map. The control room's map. My gaze swept towards those destroyed control consoles. Most of them had already turned into scrap metal, but in the corner there was an emergency backup terminal embedded in the wall. Its screen was still lit, carrying Xiao Wenjun on my back. I rushed over with all the strength in my body. I put her down, holding the gun in one hand to keep watch, while my other hand tapped wildly on that dust-covered touchscreen, operating it to bring up the structural diagram of the base. Faster. just a bit faster. That puddle of purple liquid was already less than 10 meters away from us. I could even smell that sweet, decaying odor it emitted. Finally, the 3D structural diagram of the base appeared on the screen. This place was even more complex than I imagined. Aside from the control room we were currently in, there were 5 whole layers of even massive experimental sectors down below. The energy zone, the ecological simulation zone, and the gene editing zone.